Alright, now here's the caliper bracket with the seized in pin. I already took off the rubber boot off of it. The torn up one is over there. I needed to rip it apart for you to get into it. So I ripped it apart and I put a whole bunch of penetrating oil on it. And the other one came out no problem at all. I didn't even need penetrating oil, it just slipped right out. But this guy is definitely stuck in there. So just a little bit of a battle to be to work on it. Try twisting it, that's your best thing. Don't hammer on it at all, because I've read that hammering will actually mushroom it some inside, and then it makes it even harder to take it out, because there's no other end to it, of course. So it's just it's a dead end inside. I'm going to tighten up the inner lock nut. There's actually a procedure to make sure that you do it properly. I don't know if it matters that much, but I'm going to follow all of them. First, what you do is you need to take a larger torque wrench, well, normal size one, 1/2 inch, and you need to tighten up that inner lock nut to 35 foot-pounds. And while you tighten it up to 35 foot-pounds, while you're actually tightening, you need to move them in this direction. So as you keep tightening and tightening, you keep rotating this guy this way until finally your torque wrench clicks at 35 foot-pounds, and then you stop. Then, once you're done with that step, you need to loosen that inner lock nut only a 1/4 turn. So let's say this is top and bottom, you need to move them like that. Now when you go to loosen him a 1/4 turn, you're supposed to rotate the rotor and hub this way. So as you loosen up this nut, you turn him this way. Then once you're down to a 1/4 turn backwards, then you're supposed to use a really small torque wrench. I'll show you the setup that I have right now. There we go. Alright, this is an inch-pound torque wrench. As you can see, it has a very small scale on it. It goes from 0 to 60 inch-pounds, and if you've never used an inch-pound torque wrench, it's very different from a foot-pound torque wrench in the fact that it's a lot less pressure. I didn't know this last time when I did my wheel bearings, and I actually over-tightened them because I just did it by hand, thinking that there's no way I over-tightened it just by hand. But yes, you can easily tighten these too much by hand, because you're only supposed to tighten it once you do that little procedure of 35 foot-pounds and then a 1/4 turn off and rotating the rotor at the same time, rotor and hub. You're supposed to tighten this guy up, the inner lock nut, at the very end to only 16 inch-pounds. Hold on to the outside of the rotor, and one push like that and it still just spins easily. It'll feel perfect when you tighten up the inner lock nut. You'll put on the locking ring, and then when you start to tighten up the outer lock nut, it will actually end up moving the lock ring a little bit and the inner lock nut a little bit, and that'll put more tension or more preload onto these bearings. And these guys aren't supposed to have much at all. They're only supposed to have 16 inch-pounds, and when you tighten it all up, it'll end up having who knows what, but it's definitely over 16. The inner lock nut is set to 16 inch-pounds. And I have the locking ring on top with the little pin going into it. Now, I don't know about everyone's truck, but on mine especially, if you look, there we go, if you look right in the area where the little pin, the tab I should say, if you look in the area where the tab on this locking ring is, the tab itself is actually a little smaller than the notch that's inside of your spindle. Now, since I have the inner lock nut set to exactly 16 inch-pounds, I actually used an inch-pound torque wrench, I don't want it to change, because if anything, if this lock ring ends up moving that way, it's going to end up tightening up my inner bearing, well, tighten up my bearings with that inner lock nut, because it'll move both at the same time when I tighten up the outer one. So because of that, I'm actually going to take this locking ring, pull it out, since I know this is the exact position for 16 inch-pounds on that inner one, and I'm actually going to take the inner lock nut and loosen it, and that's going to allow it so for the extra play that's here, while I tighten up the outer lock nut and this whole thing moves and ends up tightening up the inner, it'll still sit at about the right area that I want it, because you don't want this to be tight at all. You should still be able to move it quite freely by hand like that. Once everything's tightened up and the outer lock nut is on at 150 foot-pounds, with the rotor or with the calipers off, you should be able to move the hub and the rotor by hand, and it should spin a couple times. Well, maybe not a couple, but a time and a half or something like that. But it shouldn't be that hard of a resistance at all.